Okay. Welcome, everyone, to our March program of League of Women Voters, Lincoln-Lancaster County Lunch and Learn. Today's speaker is Kasey Ogle, Senior Staff Attorney with the Economic Justice Program, to talk to us today about Lincoln Fair Housing Coalition. This source of income discrimination ban will be on our spring ballot. This measure will protect home buyers and renters as they look for fair housing in the city of Lincoln. The League of Women Voters, Lincoln-Lancaster County, is one of the partners in this effort. League of Women Voters is Lincoln-Lancaster is proudly nonpartisan, neither supporting nor opposing candidates or political parties at any level of government. I'm Terry Hendrickson, chair of the Lunch and Learn series. Again, please mute your audio if you haven't already and turn off your video so we can focus on today's speaker. We will use the chat function for questions, so please type your remarks there. Kasey is going to be monitoring the chat today as we go along, so she's going to be looking for your questions during her presentation today. So Kasey has been the senior staff attorney in this area for 3 years with Nebraska Appleseed, which is a good long time. I think this initiative is going to be a really exciting piece for her. We were chatting a little bit before the program got started, and I asked her just a little about what was going on in her life. She's recently lost her pet dog, which is kind of sad. Moment of empathy there. And I asked her what she was reading. She does have a book to recommend to us, and I'm just going to say it for us all for the common good. She recommends a book by Peter Hayes, Why? Explaining the Holocaust. So I thought that I'd mention that all to you. So we're going to get started with Kasey's presentation. I'm going to turn off my audio and video now, and we'll get started. Kasey, thanks again for being with us. Let's get started.
Yes, thank you, Terry. Thanks very much. Hello, everyone. Excited to be here, glad to be here. As Terry said, I'm Kasey Ogle, Senior Staff Attorney with Nebraska Appleseed, and for Collective Impact Lincoln. I work on the Collective Impact Lincoln project, which I reference later, and so I thought I'd here up front tell you a little bit about Collective Impact Lincoln, which is a partnership between Nebraska Appleseed and Civic Nebraska, and we work to develop neighborhood leaders and advocate on Lincoln policy as identified by our neighbors as issues that have come up. But today I'm here to talk about one of those efforts that have emerged, and that's the Lincoln for Fair Housing initiative. As Terry mentioned, that will be on the May ballot. We expect it to be on the May ballot. So some more about that later. And let's get going. So first of all, I just wanted to sort of start the conversation with some information about Lincoln and the housing moment, housing crisis, if you will, that we're in this moment. So, we believe that our communities are strongest when everyone has access to affordable, safe, and accessible housing. But we know that for many Lincolnites, housing access is limited when landlords turn them away because of their source of income. So housing is unaffordable for 44% of Lincolnites who rent at all income levels. So regardless of their income, all Lincoln renters, 44%, housing is unaffordable for them. And then 11,280 Lincoln households are extremely cost burdened by their housing. So just a little bit more background on that. When we talk about affordability in general in the housing sphere, affordability is a guideline that's been set by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, and it's a guideline that says housing is affordable if you're paying no more than 30% of your income towards your housing costs. So when we talk about housing being unaffordable for those 44% of Lincolnites, they're paying more than 30% of their income on their housing. And when we talk about extremely cost burdened, so if you pay more than 30%, you're cost burdened, it's unaffordable. You're extremely cost burdened if you're paying more than 50% of your income on your housing costs. So over 11,000 Lincoln households are extremely cost burdened and are paying more than 50% of their income. And with so little after housing costs, many of our neighbors are sacrificing basic needs like food and healthcare just to make ends meet. So knowing that housing has been an emerging issue, has been a continuing issue. In 2019, the City of Lincoln commissioned a study of affordable housing, and it was adopted by the city of this. The study was put together and created what was called the Affordable Housing Coordinated Action Plan. It was adopted by the City Council in late 2020, and it confirmed what we've heard in our work through Collective Impact Lincoln. Directly from Lincoln residents, we've heard this for years, that housing quality and affordability is a challenge for many Lincolnites. So the plan offered a lot of useful information about Lincoln and our housing needs, lots of really great maps and graphics and data at the beginning of the plan, sort of outlaying what our housing ecosystem looked like at that particular moment and still pretty much looks like. So crucially, the plan outlined the number of housing units that the city needs at different price points by the year 2030, including the need for nearly 5,000 additional rental units that rent for $1,000 per month or less, with nearly half of those units renting for $500 or less. So the next slide I have shows the chart this is in the Affordable Housing Coordinated Action Plan, and it just lays out the new construction units needed by 2030 by housing type and price. So there's owner occupied and then renter occupied. And as you can see, there's a 2025 goal, a 2030 goal, and then this overall kind of throughout the whole timeline that they were looking at when they were commissioned this study from 2017 to 2030. And in the renter, what I was trying to call out earlier is that the renter occupied less than 500 and 500 to 1,000 between the years up to 2025 and up to 2030. We need, I think it's slightly over 5,000 in that area. And so the Affordable Housing Coordinated Action Plan, the City of Lincoln released sometime last year a website where they sort of are outlining Lincoln's affordable housing progress towards our goals. And the mayor has a goal of 5,000 new or redeveloped goals by the year 20, or new or, rehabilitated, redeveloped units that are affordable by the year 2030. So a sort of similar goal. And looking at that plan, we can see the city shows us there have been only 1,283 new affordable housing units constructed since 2020, and it's unclear how many of those newly constructed units meet the Affordable Housing Coordinated Action Plan's affordability goal of renting for $1,000 or less. Normally, they've been saying this is a 60% AMI thing. AMI is, not to get too sort of in the weeds here, but area median income is what AMI stands for. And so affordable for someone making 60% of the area median income, which means no more than 30% of their income spent on housing costs. So, but if we assume that all of those units fall within the affordability range and that they're rental units and not home ownership units, we are still less than a fifth of the way to where we need to be to meet the needs for low-income renters as outlined by the action plan, and showing that we're unfortunately falling further behind in addressing our housing needs. So this is just, it has been a problem, is a problem, and is continuing to be a problem in terms of affordable housing, especially for low-income renters. And that means that we need to sort of maximize what tools we already have to combat unaffordable housing to make housing affordable for people. So the action plan recognized that in a highly competitive rental market, Section 8 housing choice vouchers, those who use them are struggling to find property owners with units available to the program. So voucher holders are having trouble finding units that will accept their vouchers. And rental assistance, including Section 8 or housing choice vouchers, it's essential to helping many Lincolnites make ends meet, and it's one of the biggest tools we have to make housing more affordable for low-income Lincolnites. So especially as we fall behind in the need we have for new construction of affordable housing, we need to do everything we can to maximize the tools we already have to combat our affordable housing crisis. And sort of continuing on that theme, public assistance can help close the gap. So public assistance programs like Section 8 housing choice vouchers, Social Security, disability, and veterans benefits, all of those play a really critical role in filling the gap for people. And unfortunately, they can't help when people are unable to use them, when landlords are refusing to rent to Lincolnites who are using those different public assistance programs. In fact, in Lincoln, nearly 1 in 3 voucher recipients have to return their voucher because they can't find a landlord who will accept it. So if you look around Lincoln's apartment listings, you'll see things like no Section 8, no LHA, no vouchers. It's all around. And so the discrimination against Lincolnites using these assistance programs is no secret, and it hurts our community. I think Terry had a question. Is there data that tells us what age ranges of Lincolnites have the greatest need for housing? That's a great question, Terry. The first place I would look is in the action plan. I don't remember if it shows housing needs by age. I do remember there being some age-related data with respect to housing. But I don't remember if it says that in particular. There might also be information from the Census Bureau. They do like somewhat regular surveys, community surveys, I think they're called. And so there might be some information out there, but I'm not entirely sure where would be the best place to look. Is there information about whether the landlords who refuse vouchers are mostly private individuals or rental companies? I only know anecdotally. Yes, thank you, the American Community Survey, very much. Yeah, that's the one. I only know anecdotally, Amanda, about the difference between private individuals or rental companies. And anecdotally, it seems to be more of a barrier for private landlords and not larger companies, because those larger companies have the infrastructure already built up to sort of handle compliance with Section 8. And Section 8 is really a great program and provides a good benefit to landlords. And so I think it helps to scale it when you're able to scale it more. So anecdotally is sort of the best information that I have for that. Let's see, is there an issue with Section 8 vouchers requiring the property being used on being brought up to certain building codes that would otherwise be required? I see. That's a good question. So there are some basic requirements around inspections that are required if landlords rent to someone using a housing choice voucher. So it's not anything really additional or different than existing building codes and existing rules and regulations around renting your unit out. But there are some basic requirements around an inspection. And currently in Lincoln, we don't have proactive interior inspections in rental units. So right now, there's not a whole lot going on in the way of inspecting these rental units to ensure that they're livable for folks. And so this does at the least ensure that there is at least every 2 years. If your unit passes, I think on the first try with the first year, then you get to skip the next year's inspection with LHA right now. I have a little bit more about that later on in the presentation as well. And then let's see, please address the barriers or perceptions of landlords not renting to the housing assistance clients. Yes, I think some of that I also will have further on down. And then I don't understand what landlords are objecting to. Are the vouchers unreliable? Another great question. Vouchers are not unreliable. They are, they go straight to the landlord and come somewhat routinely. I think the barrier mostly is to initial lease up, and there's some additional, you have to have some back and forth with LHA, and there's some procedure and sort of process there. So that's a lot of the what landlords object to, in addition to the inspections that I mentioned earlier. So those tend to be their main complaints. But I think I have also a little bit more about that later in the presentation that hopefully will be helpful as well. So that's all I see for now. So I'll go back to the presentation. These are great questions. Thanks for engaging with me on this. So yeah, to go back here, who's impacted by source of income discrimination? Landlords often engage in source of income discrimination or as an excuse for discrimination that would otherwise be prohibited. So source of income discrimination hurts elders, single mothers, people with disabilities, and Lincolnites of color. And we can do better to make Lincoln a more safe and welcoming and affordable place to live and call home. Lincoln or housing assistance helps our communities thrive, and Lincoln can enact these protections to ensure that we use every housing assistance tool to their fullest extent, ensuring that all of our loved ones, from our grandchildren to our grandparents, have a safe and decent home. So what's the solution? A little bit more about the source of income protections themselves. Source of income protections, they prevent eviction and homelessness. They increase the likelihood that those with housing vouchers are able to use them. So these protections prohibit landlords from discriminating against prospective tenants because of the tenant's lawful source of income. So it has to be a lawful source of income, and otherwise that cannot be the basis for a landlord to turn you away. Source of income discrimination, it's been banned in 22 states and 128 cities and towns across the US. So this is something that's been done in a lot of places, and those studies have shown that in those places with source of income protections, the voucher failure rate is cut in half compared to places that don't have those protections. So right now our failure rate again is a little under a third or right around a third. We could get that more to like 1/6 if we pass source of income protections. So landlords, why don't they want to accept housing vouchers? So there are a lot of arguments that landlords have raised as why they don't want to accept housing vouchers and are opposed to source of income protections. So this is just kind of an overview of those reasons, but they say that accepting vouchers increase costs for themselves, and then for tenants, working with the Lincoln Housing Authority is difficult, and that in general, it's a property rights issue. So taking these sort of each one at a time, source of income protections do not increase costs. So one of the reasons landlords believe that costs will increase is because of the inspection requirement that I mentioned earlier. So when a tenant approaches a landlord and then they sort of negotiate and agree, LHA will send out an inspector to do an inspection of the unit before it can be rented out. These are inspections to ensure that rental units meet basic living standards as set out in federal regulations, and do not require more than landlords are already required to provide by city building and safety regulations. They're very sort of like no tripping hazards, no exposed wires, a lot of things like that. So currently rental units are only have internal inspections by the building and safety inspectors in Lincoln if there are enough complaints. So LHA inspections end up requiring more accountability for landlords to keep their units in a habitable condition. LHA incentivizes participation by landlords. So landlords will say LHA is difficult to work with, but LHA works really hard to work with landlords and provides incentives for doing so. So when landlords agree to participate, this is currently if they agree to participate in the Section 8 program, in addition to the required inspection, HUD requires landlords to agree to a housing assistance payment contract, which outlines the rights and obligations of the tenants, the landlord, and the housing authority. And then once the unit is leased up, landlords receive a consistent, timely payment from LHA, and they offer new landlords a $200 bonus for participating in the program for the first time, as well as an additional $200 for every new unit or voucher recipient that they later lease up. LHA, and I think again, as I mentioned this earlier, that they have an incentive for to pass inspections so that if the unit passes on its first inspection, then you don't have to be inspected next year. And if it doesn't pass on the first inspection, they get to fix it and re-inspect and then certify the unit as safe and habitable. And then unfortunately, they'd have to do another one the following year. But if you are able to get everything up to snuff, then and it passes on the first inspection, then you skip a year. So, and then the last sort of common argument that we hear from landlords is that property rights don't, or that this is a property rights issue. And unfortunately, property rights don't include discrimination. So when a property owner decides to use their property to offer housing to others in the community, they have an obligation to do so fairly. Source of income discrimination allows landlords to engage in the worst kinds of racial discrimination, refusing to rent properties in desirable areas to minorities while blaming their decision on economic factors other than race. And statistics prove that this tactic disproportionately impacts Black and Latinx renters. So prohibiting source of income discrimination, it won't drive a landlord out of a business. Again, lots of places have done this. And landlords still exist in those cities and states. But it will instead make Lincoln a more inclusive city and reduce segregation in our community. So, am I at the end? I might be. The affordable housing crisis is complicated, but we can solve one piece of the puzzle. And this is one of those pieces. Source of income protections work. By passing a source of income anti-discrimination policy, Lincoln can live up to our reputation as a welcoming city to all of our neighbors. I think that is maybe the end of my presentation. I'll just also say I'm sorry, probably should have had a slide on this, but sort of where the initiative is now, right? So we know that this is the all about the issue now, and that this is what we've been working on and why. As you all know, we launched a ballot initiative as a coalition of groups of which the League of Women Voters is a member to get this on the ballot coming up in the spring. We were able to turn in those signatures, I think in end of January, maybe. Trying to remember now, but I think it was about 4 or 5 weeks ago that those signatures were verified. And so now, after the signatures were verified, we got enough to be able to be on the ballot. The city council gets to decide. They have two options. They can either pass this themselves, or they can put the ballot initiative on the ballot for the May election, not the primary, but the general election in May. And there will be a public hearing on that on Monday. I think the council meeting is at 3 o'clock on Monday. There will be a public hearing. They have it as a resolution to put this initiative on the ballot for May. So, yeah, if anyone wants to, I'll be there on Monday, testifying. If anyone else wants to come out and show support or voice whatever your view is, you're welcome to do that. It's a public hearing. Thank you, Jean. Yeah, we turned in signatures on February 3rd and then certified on February 7th. So that's kind of where it is now. We expect to hear on Monday that the council will vote. There will be a public hearing and a vote on Monday. After the hearing, the council will decide whether or not to send this to the ballot. And we expect, or, you know, we hope that they will pass it and are prepared for them to put it on the ballot in the alternative. So I think that's where it's at now. And I see Terry has a question. Is there a recording instrument to record how many percentages of Section 8 are not accepted? That is a good question, Terry. I don't know of something that tracks that. I know that when someone gets a voucher, they have to start a housing search, and it's a really difficult housing search. They can sometimes contact hundreds of landlords about hundreds of different units before they're able to find someone within the correct price range that will accept the voucher and will work with them. So I don't know if there's something that says like how many are not accepted. And there is all of the money that Lincoln Housing Authority gets for housing vouchers gets used every year. If someone gets a voucher and is unable to use it, they turn it back to the housing authority and they have to sort of go back to the back of the line. There's a line for the housing vouchers, a waiting list. They have to go back to kind of the back of the waiting list. And it goes to the next person and they can try their housing search again. And through that process, all of the money that the housing authority gets for vouchers ends up getting used. And what we also know from that, I think, is you can see that there are certain types of people who are receiving vouchers that landlords will work with, and certain types who are less likely to be able to find a house. So sort of that discrimination by proxy, using Section 8 as an excuse, a proxy for racial discrimination. So I don't know if that helps answer your question a bit more. I will stop sharing if that's okay with everyone, and if you want, we can just have a conversation. I'm happy to answer more questions. Yeah. And yeah, Terry, if you have more that would be helpful to hear, I'd love to hear from you.
Thank you, Kasey. It seems like a very straightforward plan, and it's exciting to know that next week City Council will be considering this. While people are thinking of follow-up questions, if they have any, I want you to know that at the top of the chat, our lincolnleague.org website is there. You're all invited to join our ranks if you haven't already, to become a member of League of Women Voters, Lincoln-Lancaster. You might want to consider becoming trained as a deputy registrar to help with voter registrations. That's one of the main things we do. I want to also let you know that April 26th from 9 till noon is our annual meeting. Check our website for details and please do join us. Our next Lunch and Learn program on April 6th is not yet ready to announce, so watch for it in the newspaper and the League newsletter when that's buttoned up. But May's Lunch and Learn topic is this: why politics makes bastards of us all. It'll be presented by Kevin Smith, who's a member of the Political Science Department at UNL. He's also a resident faculty member at the Center for Brain, Biology, and Behavior. And he's talking about forms of ethical judgment in the political arena. That's a compelling title, isn't it? Our speakers for the June 5th Lunch and Learn will be faculty members from UNMC, their College of Public Health. They'll be speaking on the topic of environmental justice. We do not have any shortage of fascinating topics to bring to you. I see there's another question in the chat for you, Kasey. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I see a couple now. Is it more difficult to evict people on Section 8? That's a good question. There are additional requirements from the federal government. So if you accept Section 8 right now, you would have to provide longer notice and longer periods to cure, especially for a non-payment eviction. So there's a federal law right now that says sort of any federally subsidized unit, which includes Section 8, includes other types of federally subsidized units like units owned by LHA, in addition to LIHTC developments, which is low-income housing tax credit developments, and even things like rental properties that are backed by federally backed mortgages through like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, things like that. So that's kind of wide. It would include any unit that is participating in the Section 8 program. So to that extent, I think, yes, arguably it is a little bit more difficult in some ways to evict people on Section 8. Because there are additional protections in certain federal regulations for those tenants. And then I see I'm totally supportive of this idea, but but what about very small landlords? Is there a concern that some smaller landlord would be driven out of the market? I think this is a good question. And I'd be curious why you think your house wouldn't pass an inspection. But I think, regardless of what it is in particular, I think that when someone chooses to offer their property as a home for somebody else, that comes with certain responsibilities. And we know what we've like decided what those responsibilities are in terms of laying out the HUD regulations, and we have building and safety codes that landlords already have in place. So if those are, already landlords need to comply with that. If you choose to lease out your property and offer it as a home for someone else, then those are already obligations that folks have. So I see that you've responded. There's some broken windows and leaky. I'm not sure about the door drafts, but the handrails, I can understand that, and the windows, I think, is a concern. And so yeah, I understand what you're talking about. Intact door seals. Interesting. Very fair, Katie. Appreciate that follow-up. Okay, and then I see invidious discrimination is despicable and credible problem addressed by this measure. But small landlords would fear getting entangled in the inspection process. I'm curious about your idea here about a two-tiered inspection system. I think this sort of goes back to the conversation I was having with Katie which is that like if someone's going to offer their property as a rental unit, we have an understanding of the safety level required for that comes with a certain degree of business responsibility when you choose to do that. So I think that's my like initial thought, but I'd be curious to hear more about this, the two-tier inspection system, sort of what are you envisioning and yeah.
We may have come to the end of the questions that we see dropped in the chat. There are lots of things that come into play with things like this. I think about the entire Airbnb system, for example, and what they have to deal with. However, what we're working with here in particular is income discrimination, which is a great first step and an important one for Lincoln when it comes to discriminatory practices and low-income housing and our ability to be a welcoming community. I believe we've come to the end of a really good presentation. Kasey, we're grateful for the information you've presented to us today. Thank you for your good work. We will convene again the first Thursday in April. We are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.